Today, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Wrenelle Stander, the CEO of Comair Limited. Wrenelle's got a fascinating aviation story and is guiding the airline through what is probably its most challenging time in its 70-plus year history. Now, by way of background, for those who don't know the airline, Comair actually became a franchise partner of British Airways back in 1996 and also launched Africa's first no-frills carrier, Kulula.com, in 2001. Now, the airline's evolved from this position to be much more than just a carrier, with a training center, lounges, catering, and digital services as well. Now, as with all airlines, the airline's currently facing headwinds, and today we want to explore how these are being addressed. So welcome to the podcast, Wrenelle, and thanks for taking the time to speak with us today.
Good morning, John. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome, most welcome. So let's start with you. It's the customary fashion with the podcast, and I know you've got a really interesting and varied background. So give us a bit of an update. Where did your love of aviation take root, and obviously, what's your experience been up to this point?
Yeah, John. So I've got probably my working career spans about 26 years. And it's really, I've been working in two key industries. The first has been aviation, and the second has been energy. My aviation interest was triggered probably around 29 years ago when I was doing my master's in business administration at Oxford Polytechnic in the UK. And I was really interested in the complexity of the aviation industry. And at that time, there was a whole process underway to create the single European aviation or air transport market. That caught my interest, and ever since then, I've been really interested in the impact of government policy on commercial enterprises, on companies. And I proceeded to do my thesis on the impact of European deregulation on, the impact of European deregulation on British Airways. So I did a focus, so my case study was British Airways. And that was followed with an internship at British Airways. So I spent 6 months working at British Airways in the internal business consulting department. I have been very, very lucky in my career. I've managed large enterprises, including the Air Traffic and Navigation Services Company. I was very instrumental in setting up the Civil Aviation Authority in South Africa. And of course, I worked as the Deputy CEO of the Civil Aviation Authority. I'm currently the CEO of Comair, and probably this to date has been my most difficult and my most complex assignment. But I do have to say that almost every single previous role has in some way prepared me for this particular role.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I mean, if you, no, absolutely. I mean, if you've been both sides of the fence, you've obviously been in the government side. You've studied that. You've been on the yes. private side. So you yes. understand the process. Yes. And obviously with the ATNS and the CAA, all of this gives you so much so much.
Absolutely,
experience.
Absolutely.
But as you say, nothing can prepare you for what has happened over the last couple of years and all of these different situations that we find ourselves in. So, of course, Comair Limited, it's no secret that it's in a business rescue process at the moment. So, without divulging any state secrets, if you can give us a bit of an overview as to where we're at today on the 17th of July, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, so on the 17th of July, I'm very pleased to be able to say that we have two possible investors that are interested in investing in the Comair business. I think, as you would have seen from media coverage, that Comair requires a 1.5 billion rand investment. Both investors have indicated an interest and are keen to do that. In terms of, and I think previously there was an indication that we would reduce the fleet substantially. We would only start in November, and that we might sell off some of our ancillary businesses. I'm pleased to say that both of the investors have indicated that they would like us to resume flying a lot sooner. They've also indicated that they would like us to ramp up to at least 20 aircraft over the next 18 months. and they've both indicated that they would not like us to sell our ancillary businesses. So obviously, the next steps in the process would be the publication of the business plan. The BRPs have the job of selecting the investor that provides the best benefit to all of the stakeholders, staff, lenders, lessors, creditors, so it'll be the proposal that has the best interest of all of the stakeholders. That will be published in a business plan in about 2 weeks' time, and in a month's time, it will go to the creditors to be voted upon. I'm very pleased, obviously, that the SAA business plan has been approved, because it just shows that it can be done. What is very interesting about our process, which is different to the SAA process, is that once Comair issues its business plan, once the BRPs issue the business plan, we will already have an investor which supports that business plan. So we will be in a much better position to take to the skies as quickly as possible.
Yeah, understood. So obviously you've got all the ducks in a row, if you look at it that way, rather than saying we have a plan, but we don't necessarily have secured the money. We actually have worked almost with them to create something that is investable, so that we know that the process should be, touch wood, a smoother process.
A smoother process.
Everybody's in communication. Oh, that's really encouraging.
And
really,
lots
really
of obviously lots of work behind the scenes also to make sure that that all of the stakeholders are comfortable with the plans, and hopefully by the time it is tabled, we will have a much smoother process. That is my hope, and we have worked hard to try and achieve that. So I'm fairly optimistic that it will be a smooth process.
Fantastic. Yeah, really great to start with some optimism. Now, I've been doing some work with the South African government, South African Tourism and the ministry. We did some webinars early on in the COVID crisis with the team there, talking about restarting operations, domestic and international travel, when that could start. And obviously back then, that was April, May, there was so much conjecture over how, when, why, etc. So just we've got to bear that in mind when we're looking at the current market in South Africa. And obviously it's a moving target, because the SAA process on a daily basis is changing. But I just wanted to get a general idea of your views on the current market within South Africa, and the changes that you think that, or the changes are going to be made at Comair Limited to obviously make yourself stronger post-COVID.
Yeah. So if I could maybe start with the aviation market, and then I'll follow on with Comair and what we're hoping to achieve. But I think that obviously South Africa's had one of the hardest lockdowns in the world, and in fact our aviation industry is there's an impact on the industry. Right now, we have got Fly Safair, Mango, SAA Link, and Comair that are operating very limited services. You're probably aware that right now you have to have a permit to fly. So the demand has been impacted as a result of that. Fly Safair is currently operating, our estimation, about 20% of their capacity. Mango is operating about 10% of their capacity. If you compare last year June versus this year June, we're operating about 3.3% of the capacity. So it is obviously it is going to take some time before our demand picks up. I should, however, indicate that there's been a lot of hard work which we as an industry have been we've invested in working alongside government to convince government that it really, really is important to open up the industry. So as an industry, we have stood together and we've held hands. So it's been, the Airline Association with the board of airline representatives, with all of the CEOs of the state-owned entities. So we have stood together as an airline industry and have worked together to try and, I don't want to say convince government, but try to demonstrate to government why it is possible to open the industry. So we've seen a lot of movement. You would have seen today we had some good news in the sense that additional airports have been opened. And so most of our airports today are open. However, the constraint is the preparation that has to go into the health protocol. So we cannot open the airports unless the Department of Health and all of the health practitioners are in a position to support the airline and the industry at those ports of entry. So we're very excited that as we go through, once we get to level 2, obviously there will be unlimited travel. We'll be able to bring, family travel, etc., etc. So that really is where the industry is at the moment. A lot of collective effort to also convince our customers that it's safe to fly, collective effort to convince our staff that it's safe to work. So there's quite a bit of work obviously going into that. Perhaps a little bit about Comair and where Comair finds itself. So I think it's important to maybe just remind you that pre-COVID, Comair Limited was the biggest player in the market. We've obviously had 2 very established brands, British Airways and the Kulula.com brand. I think what has been really good about that is that we've been able to operate in 2 market segments. So we've been able to operate in the low-cost segment, but also in the full-service segment. Looking forward, I want to call it the 3 R's, but the first thing is to reset the cost base. So we are very focused on reducing our cost base by 30%. And there's obviously a lot of work going into that. Our second R is to restart. Obviously, given where we are, there's a lot of work that has to go into that. In order to restart, we realize that there's a lot of work that we're going to have to do with our customers. We have lost customer confidence, and there's a lot of work that we're going to have to do to rebuild our customer confidence, and obviously we're going to have to also work with our staff. That will be followed with stimulating demand. We believe that we're probably going to be stimulating demand in the first instance with your VFR traffic, families wanting to see each other, and that'll probably be on the Kulula brand. A lot of work will also go into working with our corporates and with government. And we see a huge opportunity there because South African Airways will come back. We understand from the business plan are not smaller than before. So there's a huge opportunity for us to grow a lot faster in the corporate and government space. Right now, Parliament is Comair's biggest customer. And we're certainly looking forward to growing into that. Having said that, our focus is going to be on sustainability. So it's not going to be silly buggers to simply grow market share. Our focus will be on achieving sustainable profit going forward. And we will continue to, I think one of our strengths as a group is our multiple partnerships. So we have a lot of partnerships that we intend to continue to leverage. I'm not going to name all of them, but we've obviously got our partnership with British Airways, Mainline. We've got partnerships with Vitality. So we intend to, and we have maintained constant, literally, every 2 weeks we've been in contact with our key partners, and we intend to come back and to continue to leverage all of that. Obviously, a key element also is going to be the third R is ramp up. And there we are looking at introducing a lot of efficiency. So the Comair schedule hadn't changed for almost 12 years. And we, as a result of that, there were lots of inefficiencies that, grew into the system. So we will be, we have in fact reviewed our schedule. So during this time, we've reviewed our schedule. We're intending to come out with a very refined schedule that's efficient and that optimizes the use of our staff and the fleet. And of course, we're also looking very closely at regional markets, because that is obviously where, there are lots of opportunities to increase and improve our profitability. All of the R's are underpinned by a digital approach. So we are looking to invest in in a digital strategy. We've got a new executive that we've brought in. He, in fact, has a PhD in IT and has been part of the digitalization processes across two JSE-listed companies, not airlines, but other entities. So we're really looking forward to introducing much more self-service options and obviously much more mobile options, both for staff and for our customers. But underpinning all of this, without our customers, we don't have a chance. And so I'm very excited because we're doing a lot of work also with staff to emphasize and to demonstrate that customer centricity is what is going to take us into the next phase. And so we're very excited to be coming back into the market, and that obviously is our approach.
Yeah, and I'm sure, you know, you'll come back stronger. At the end of the day, you've got
Yes.
74 years of goodwill and of solid reputation.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
you know, you can't, it doesn't matter who you are, you can't buy that overnight. You know, you need to work up that reputation, and that goodwill will come back because people know the brand and they've worked with it. So I just wanted to cover a couple of things that you mentioned. One is that you're acting chairperson of ASA, of the Airline Association of Southern Africa, and you know, we know Chris very well, but of course there's been this collaborative approach. So there's a couple of questions on here. One is, it's quite unusual in other parts of Africa and other parts of the world, but luckily in South Africa and Southern Africa, you actually have a lot of these organizations and these associations that were already in place to then create this unification. So my question on that is, how important, you know, has that been that those structures already existed that you could leverage on? And then just leading on from that, going back into the market when you restart and what you're expecting to see from your competition, what you alluded to and what nobody wants in the industry is obviously a race to the bottom in terms of pricing. We need people to kind of, you know, stick to their guns and not underprice and not do things below cost. Do you think that will happen, and will those institutions help you when it comes to having those conversations? Are you going to align, or are people going to go away and say, I'm going to be the cheapest in the market because I want to recover the capacity? I know it's a bit of a crystal ball and it's not all your choice, but are those conversations being had?
Yeah, so I think that having these associations has been absolutely critical to the way, in fact, one of my, you know, apart from my board meeting, which happens about an hour's time, and then also we've got a meeting of the Airline Association. So all of the airline CEOs and all of the industry CEOs will get onto a call, we'll see where we're at, we will agree on what it is that we need to do. I cannot emphasize how important it has been to have all of these CEOs and organizations, and I can assure you that every CEO has been participating personally. There's been no, no CEO that has sent somebody in, as a substitute. So as CEOs, we've been very focused on making sure that the airline industry and the industry in general opens up and we start operating again. And Chris Wagenthal, as the chairman of ASA, he's been instrumental in coordinating all of this and pulling all of this together. We've also had fantastic support from all of the state-owned enterprises, so Civil Aviation Authority, Airports Company, and ATNS. It has been a lot easier to work opposite government with the support of the CEOs of the state-owned enterprises. So that has been absolutely something that I cannot overemphasize. It's been critical to our current success. What has also been amazing is that our Minister of Transport has been open, and our Director General of Transport has been open to sitting with us. We've often had meetings on a Friday, meetings on a Saturday morning with them, talking to them. They've listened to us and they've responded, notwithstanding that we have, as an industry, we've had to demonstrate that we're responsible and that we would ensure that all of the protocols and the safety protocols are maintained and followed. We had lots of sessions with the Minister also at the airport to demonstrate on board aircraft, to demonstrate how we would implement some of these safety protocols. So it's been a very active process of engaging and assuring all of the different players in the industry that we could do this and that we can do this. So there's been quite a lot of work that's been happening. Obviously, within the South African context, most of the operators, except for South African Airways, are private operators. And because we have, obviously, we've liberalized the market. Our market's been liberalized since the 90s, 1992. We are governed by competition rules. So we are going to compete in the market. It's survival of the fittest. That, unfortunately, is what it is about. So some will, compete on marketing. Some will compete on price. Others will compete on being focused on the customer. So we're all going to obviously have different ways of competing. We unfortunately are not in a position as an industry, unless we get special permission from the Competition Commission, we cannot talk about how we are going to be operating. So even when we meet, the first item on the agenda is, that we have to express our awareness that we're not allowed to conduct in any anti-competitive or competitive conversations. So we are all very anxious and nervous and excited to see how how we're all going to be competing in the market. But it's not something that we've discussed.
So I've got this vision now of like a big poker table, and you're all sat there with your cards, and
yes.
Everybody's looking at each other, and you've got your sunglasses on, and Elmar's got his sunglasses on, and there's Roger in the corner with his leather jacket. I've got this vision, but
it is a little bit like that. So we're all very cooperative, very friendly, but we are competitors, and I think we all know that. So yeah.
But it's so important, obviously we're a Pan-African business and a Pan-African events company and media company. And, what we want is, we've been saying for so long, obviously, open competition, single African air transport market, take away the barriers to competition. And competition ultimately is good for the customer, because the customer then is going to be the beneficiary of that competition, and people actually having to innovate and create efficiencies. Like you said, this whole opportunity of COVID, there's been so many bad things, but one opportunity is that opportunity to just look at everything. Like you mentioned about your schedules. Hey, these haven't changed. We need to now, we have that break where we can just look at everything fresh and say, okay, we're going to change this, and we're going to look at new markets as well as the existing ones that we've just served for a long time. And of course, you've got to take into account what's going to happen with the international traffic as well, and the restart of operations there, because that's still what we're talking about today is very much a domestic, and then hopefully soon a regional market as well. So I want to move on from that conversation. Really appreciate you giving us that insight. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the fleet, because this was a sort of a bit of an issue that when we came into COVID was already in process. So of course, Comair ordered 8 737 Maxes. You had 1 delivered, and then of course the developments with the aircraft are very well known. So what are the plans with the fleet? Because I assume you obviously leased in additional capacity to cover this, and where are you at the moment? I haven't heard too much about this, but what are you hearing from Boeing, and what's the plans with the fleet?
Yeah, so obviously Comair, initiated in around 2017, initiated a fleet renewal program. And there was a two-pronged strategy. The first strategy was to buy 8 brand new MAX aircraft. And the second prong was to bring in 5 leases with newer 800s. And obviously all of that kind of was set for implementation in 2019. So over the last period, we've seen, 5 new leases coming in. And obviously we also took delivery of the first MAX. I don't have to tell you, but the MAX was grounded. Going forward, it is going to depend very much on the different investor approaches to the MAX. But certainly one investor is open to keeping the MAXes, and the other investor is very certain that the MAXes need to be returned. So obviously it is going to depend, the future of the MAX within the Comair stable is going to depend very much on the appetite of the future investors in the maxes. And also, there's obviously also an ongoing discussion in most airlines about whether you own, whether you lease. I do believe that it's usually, the answer is usually a combination, and it's very much dependent on cash flow and I suppose your ability to attract debt. So that one is, I'm afraid, still unresolved and will be resolved once you'll know what it's going to be when the business plan is published.
No, that's great. That's great, and it gives us as much clarity as we can expect, at the moment. And yeah. I think, again, it's the same thing with owning or leasing. I think the options are changing on a daily basis. We've gone from a very, especially after the grounding of the MAX, suddenly there was this huge demand and prices obviously were pushed
800s.
up. Prices, it was really difficult. Whereas, potentially now, that market has changed. I mean, British Airways, I think, have announced this morning they're retiring all of their 747s, all their jumbos. So, things are changing on a daily basis, and A380 being taken out of service, and those wide body aircraft, it seems like at the moment, obviously there's less demand, but the narrow bodies and the regional jets and the props, they probably will remain and recover first. But who knows, is the honest truth. And things have, even looking at the South African market, from me being quite close to it, there were discussions initially that you wouldn't have domestic travel till October. That's already happening, okay, with permits, but it is happening. And that's testament to the lobbying efforts of yourself and your colleagues and the tourism industry as a whole, because obviously aviation is such an important part of the value chain. So we all want the same thing, but of course we all want to do it safely and securely. And we have our own challenges over here in Europe as well. So it's very different for each country. So I want to talk, before we finish, a little bit about the diversification of the business. I mentioned it in the intro that you've obviously gone into training centers, into travel, into technology, into lounges as well. So how have these processes been impacted by COVID? Are you going to continue with this diversification strategy, or are things going to kind of centralize on the operation of the airline? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that obviously the diversification strategy is an important part of our business, but I think that it took away the focus from the airline. So our primary focus will be the airline, but we'll continue to have a training academy. We'll continue to obviously work with the catering business and the travel business. Right now, some of those businesses are not in business rescue. So we have the training simulator, the simulator part of the training academy is operating. In fact, a lot of the, Fly Safi and Star Cargo pilots are refreshing their training, so that the simulator is operating. We also still, working, the travel business is still open, and the catering business, we've done quite a bit of work to provide frozen foods into other areas like Pick and Pay, etc. And those businesses are still operating. So we will continue to maintain those businesses. That in the case of the technology business, we've brought that back into Comair. So we've actually bought, we've bought the other shareholders' shares, and Nacelle is now back within the Comair stable. So we're not anticipating. I think that all of those newer businesses that were brought in require investments that we're not going to be able to make in the future. So we've certainly divested also from all of the non-performing or non-core assets. So we've closed down Slow in the City, we've closed down the Course restaurant, we've brought Nacelle back in-house. And so all of these big decisions have also been made and implemented while we've been in lockdown. But we will continue to have a training business, we'll continue to have a catering business, and of course also a travel business. So those are key elements, but we're not intending to aggressively grow those just yet.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think, in this diversification, it's a really interesting model, and actually it's a bit of a victim to just timing, because if you had a little bit longer and these things were established, any new business, any new venture, it requires time to get into the market, and sometimes you can just be affected by exterior factors that are just
Yeah.
you know, it's just a
Yeah.
timing issue. But I
Yeah,
totally
so it's a timing issue, but fundamentally, you know, it's about mitigating the risks. So, you know, when the airline business is not doing well, the other businesses could potentially do well. So that is really, you know, and then also we were about to buy a maintenance organization, which we then, you know, we also then, I think, you know, we were about to buy Star Cargo, which was, you know, the leasing and the maintenance business, but we obviously had a mutual termination of that agreement. So we're just going to slow down the diversification process, but long term, it is still part of our strategy.
Yeah, bring it back in, make it sustainable again, and then obviously you can look at these in the future. But I sincerely hope that other airlines listening to this and watching this do think about this, because there is so much scope when you are an airline. You know, you look at what Ethiopian have done over the last few years now, having a big hotel in Addis, having the training academy, the MRO, the cargo. You know, they've really been able to expand, and then of course they've done lots of equity and sort of joint ventures in different countries. So there are airlines doing it, and you see it around the world, lots of examples. But I don't think that those who just focus and say, I just want to operate the airline and that's it, that's fine. But there are opportunities to do other things as well. So I sincerely hope that continues, because I love the spirit of innovation at Comair. I think it's really
absolutely.
Yeah, and that spirit doesn't, you know, it's just going to be applied somewhere else. Like you said, you're going to put that innovation into the business itself to make sure that the experience and that the airline is sustainable going forward. And that's of course going to, you know, the investors are going to like that as well. So big question, $100,000 million question. How do we rebuild this traveler confidence? How do we get people flying again and convince that airlines are safe? And you know, how do we do this? And do we do this as an industry? And you know, who should be involved?
Yeah, I think it is as an industry, but also as individual airlines, individual CEOs. You know, and I think that it's going to be a process of just really starting to work with our customers, starting to share with our customers, you know, what all of the safety parameters, the safety, you know, the standard operating processes are to ensure the safe carriage of our customers. So I think it's going to be a lot of sharing of information, and also getting our customers to probably also share that they felt confident, they felt safe. Our staff talking about how confident they felt or how safe they felt. And hopefully, you know, so there's a lot of, I've certainly been traveling already. And certain things give me comfort, you know, so having my temperature taken at the airport, having limited contact, the enforcement of masks, having hand sanitizers all around the airport. So just having all of those symbols, having your temperature taken again when you board the aircraft, making sure, you know, so I feel confident when the airline or the airport, when I can see those visible signs of you know, being taken, of precautions being taken. So we're going to have to make it very visible. What has been very exciting about Airports Company South Africa, they've actually got people walking around at Joburg International Airport, and they're actually reminding people that they must socially distance. So they just walk around the airport, they've got big banners, and they're just reminding people and constantly talking to people to get people to, you know, to socially distance. It's about how we board our aircraft. It's about, you know, so there are lots and lots of, I saw something that I really liked on Fly Safi, you know, the cabin attendants were wearing face masks, and on the masks, there were these beautiful pink lips. You know, so there's lots of very interesting things I've also, you know, that I've seen. And certainly we are currently also looking at, you know, what we're going to do to make it special and interesting for our customers to feel safe, to feel confident to start flying again.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I know EasyJet have got masks for kids with, you know, animal faces and things like that.
Yes.
Just to make people, it's confidence and it's comfort, isn't it? It's feeling comfortable in that situation. And like you say, get the people in the industry, so people like myself and other people, when we fly, we need to be telling people, yes, actually this was normal, this was great, and that will start to permeate. And your average traveler as well, to do that. But also, if somebody finds a pain point, they need to raise it so we can fix it, and therefore it's going to be the same going forward.
It's going to be an iterative process. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not just, right, we've done this, deal with it. It's let's use that feedback to improve the process. But of course, we're going to be living under these conditions for a period. And we don't know how long that is. So you have to just adapt to where it is right now. So final question for you then, Wrenelle, is do you feel like the market has changed forever as a result of COVID? And do you ever think that we'll recover back to 2019? And if we do, how long do you think this could take? And I suppose the question here probably needs to be caveated between what the South African and the regional market down there and the global market, because everybody seems to have a different opinion. Some are very pessimistic, some are very optimistic, and some are somewhere in the air and they throw their hands in the air, which is probably me, and say, do you know what, I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean, one has to be so careful when one answers this question. But I'm an eternal optimist. When we first started on this journey, we did not expect to be flying right now. We all expected that the first time we would fly would be in November. And so sometimes it's really about, what are you doing to make sure that something happens and not waiting for things to happen to you. So I think certainly in our industry, there's been a lot of making things happen. But I think what's really interesting about the South African market as well is that we don't have long distance trains. We don't have, a fantastic public transport system, etc. So to get to Cape Town from Johannesburg, you either sit in a car for 13 to 15 hours, and that might involve sleeping somewhere overnight, or you get onto a plane. So we have very big distances. So I'm fairly optimistic. We're thinking that we'll get back to, not quite back to pre-COVID levels, but we do think we'll get close in the next 12 to 18 months. I think that obviously it is going to depend very much on the recovery. So we've got different scenarios. We've got our government has issued 3 possible GDP growth scenarios. And right now we're modeling, what that would mean for the airline industry. And because obviously, the growth of the industry follows GDP growth quite closely. So we are optimistic that it is going to take between 12 and 18 months. Companies have to start working again. South Africa has to start going again. In the region, I'm very optimistic. Kenya Airways has started operating. Ethiopian Airlines are starting to operate. In Namibia, they're struggling a little bit in terms of but they're open to operate. So we are starting to see life coming back into the region. Globally, I think, our airline in particular is very, we very not reliant, but there is a close relationship with foreign, traffic coming in. So we obviously feed most of the British Airways mainline traffic. We feed Virgin traffic on Kulula. We've got lots of relationships, lots of code-share partners, etc. So we're looking, very closely, monitoring very closely what happens internationally. But the estimated time of the South African economy opening to the international market is closer to end of November, December. So yes, I'm hoping. What I've also been very encouraged to see is that a lot of international travelers see South Africa as a preferred post-COVID destination. So I'm hopeful, and I hope that nobody comes to watch this video and say, but you said 18 months ago that we'd be back to, but I'm an eternal optimist, and I'm going to put my money on 18 months.
Fantastic. No, there's a caveat for anybody watching. This is just, this is recorded on the 17th of July, 2020, and, nobody will be held accountable for predictions of things that they have no input into. Yeah, I mean, the one thing about November, December, and you're absolutely right, is of course that coincides with the summer. And in South Africa.
So,
So, you know,
yeah,
and we know how wonderful things are down there. But of course, people have got to, you know, survive and ride out the next four months or however long it will be.
absolutely.
Focus with the domestic travel and potentially some regional travel as well. So that's a whole different conversation that we can have once Comair's back up running, and we can maybe reconvene and we can talk about the international and South Africa's place in
Yes,
the world. And this could be the reset. As I said, this could be the time where we get a fresh start and the mistakes we were making in the past are rectified, and
yes,
we have a new approach.
absolutely.
So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, Wrenelle. I know how busy you are at the moment, and all of our listeners and our viewers I'm sure will really appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and we wish you all the best over the
Thank you so
coming
much.
months, and we'll be here to support and to follow it, and obviously see you back up in the sky. So thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you so much for allowing us this opportunity. And I look forward to chatting to you and the listeners again.
Wonderful. So thank you everybody out there for joining us today. As usual, all that we ask in return for watching or listening to this is hit the share button, send this to one person in your network you think would benefit from having a listen. Don't miss another episode. You can subscribe to the Aviadev Insight Africa podcast on iTunes, on Spotify. You can download the app in the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store so you don't miss another episode. And finally, the final thing, if you could take the time to give us a rating in the Apple Podcast Store, that would mean the world to us. It will help us get found by even more people than the 160 countries we are listened to in currently. And we'll continue to bring the key voices of African aviation to the world. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you for the next episode very soon.